the queen and the rook battery is much like the idea of doubling or tripling up. When we mention a battery in chess, it's the use of two or more pieces on the same rank file or diagonals. You may remember in volume 1 of the DVD series that I was talking about always looking out for tactics that work with pieces that occur on the same rank file and diagonal. This is the similar sort of thing, except this is where you're using your own piece on the same diagonals or ranks files in order to work together to produce a strong army. Now, I'm going to show you how the queen and rook work nicely together because of their use of the open files. In this position, for example, you can see that white has nicely tripled apple on the H file. And this sort of typical situation occurs when you've got one side castling kingside in a game and one side castling queenside. Usually when this happens, you want it's a race for whoever can get the most attack in as quickly as possible. By the looks of this game, it seems that black has actually been quite slow with this hack. Even though he's a significant amount of material up, he hasn't really produced much weakness on the white king, whereas white is completely dominating down this H file. So a move like rook H8 here is an extremely strong move. In fact, that black has absolutely no choice but to capture this, and white now has a choice of checkmate. He can capture on H8, but also Queen H7 is checkmate as well. So it just shows you the strength of this open file and how well the queen and the rook work together because they can back each other up. And again, you can see from this position, it's the use of this tripling up and the order that they come into. And again, this rook, queen, rook is a favourable order here. Taking a look at this diagram, again, I'm using similar sort of position. This is taken from an actual game where this has occurred, and they haven't got the tripling up on the H file here. But you can see how strong it is to have this open H file. White hasn't actually castled, but left his king in the centre of the board, which is usually quite dubious. But because of his strength on this open file, there's not that much that black can do about it. So at the moment there's no checkmate threat with no sacrifices down the H file, but simple move as doubling up and playing queen H2 actually makes this an unstoppable move. There is nothing here that black can do to defend this. He can delay the checkmate by throwing in the queen check, but then after you just take it again, you've got no choice. Unfortunately, this bishop on this diagonal is doing quite a good job pinning the rook and controlling those squares, and black can't right away. No matter what he does, the queen is going to come to either H7 or H8 and produce a checkmate. So this is absolutely unstoppable, and again, it comes from this queen and rook battery. Now, in this example, this is a very common sort of style that I've seen in a very many tactics books and software and things like that, and you could see this sort of example coming up over and over again because it does happen in games. It's quite clear that black and white castle queenside and black castle kingside, and white's really been trying to open up his king. And again, this tripling of the same order of these rook, queen, rook on this file has allowed white to come in and do some damage. So here it's not all about this G file, but in fact you do want to try and make way for this queen to come to G8 and checkmate. So you just get rid of your rook on G8 by playing rook H8 check, and there's nothing that black can do but take it, and then queen G8 is checkmate. So you can see how well the queen and rook do work together. And if you can and have the chance to do doubling up or the mates along open files, and you can see how well this queen and rook battery does work together. The next type of battery that I will talk about is the queen and bishop battery. Now, these work well together along diagonals, obviously, so it's different to the queen and rook battery, which usually works along open files, whereas this one would work along and the diagonals. Now, this position here is a good example for black because he's set up his bishop and queen quite nicely along this diagonal, eyeing at this h2 square, which would be a perfect place to do a checkmate here. Now, unfortunately, there's a pawn in the way on e5, so a very nice idea would be to play pawn to e4, which has two different jobs. First of all, it unpaids the way for the queen to come to h2, and secondly, it tries to remove the defender, that is the knight, on f3. Now, if his knight were to move out the way, then queen takes h2 would be checkmate. So those, and it's also because it's a discovered attack as well. So a lot of people wouldn't see this sort of move, and would naturally just play a move like knight d4, and then after queen takes h2, that would be the end of the game. And you could see how well they work together. This bishop all the way down from c7 is providing backup to the squeak. So it's a very, very strong idea to play. But I really like this e4 idea because it does kill two birds with one stone hit. Now, I've seen this happen a lot. It's a very easy way to try and to achieve results on the castled king. The h2 square is usually vulnerable, likewise for black. The h7 square, the only piece that's stopping it being dangerous is a knight. So usually you can try and remove that defender, and then you create a checkmate. And this queen bishop battery is the perfect way to try and to exploit this. Now, one of my students had a game like this very recently, and I remember watching it. I was quite impressed. My student played white, and it started off with the French defence, which we've looked at in chapter 1 when we looked at the Milner-Barry Gambit. Started off very normal, but this time my student played e takes d5, which is the exchange variation. It's just exchanging, and quite often you get into very symmetrical positions, and it can be said to be boring because not much happens. But you can also get some quite exciting positions out of it, and quite a lot of tactical themes come from this sort of structure. So it's useful to know. Now, my student played a very good move, which is bishop d3. Which stops this bishop coming to f5, and also it's getting ready to point at the king this way, which comes in useful later. Black continued with the development of knight f6. My student played c3, just solidifying the center for a pawn chain. Also made space for his bishop to move backwards should it so wish to. And then black just developed very passively and very quietly with bishop e7. Knight f3, they both castled, and you can see already there's not a lot of difference in the position, but this bishop on d3 is a lot better than the bishop on e7 at the moment. e7 wasn't the best square they could have moved that to. Black then chose to play knight c6. Now, usually I prefer when people support their centre with the c-pawn rather than putting the knight on c6, because if you look at this knight now, due to white's pawn chain, this knight doesn't really have anywhere good it can go at the moment, and it can only go to the rim or backwards. So I don't really like the idea of knight c6 in this position, because it doesn't really have that much of a good future. So a student then played bishop to g5, which put more pressure on that knight, on f6, hoping to create some more damage, I guess, and the king side due to that being his defender. Black then played a bit of a strange move, a6. I don't really see much points behind this move. Usually it's to stop a piece coming to here, but this bishop was never going to come to b5 because it's greatly placed on d3. So this is when the maneuver started for white. He decided to play bishop to c2, which seems like a very strange move because you move your pieces backwards, and it doesn't really seem to do anything, and it might not be the best move in this position. I think you should be continuing development. Black probably has quite a lot of good replies here. For example, maybe something like putting the knight into the center here, and gaining some space by swapping off some pieces might have been a good option. But Black didn't do this. He actually played bishop to g4, which developed his bishop and pinned the knight, which is quite sensible. But walks straight into the white's plan of queen to d3, so gets at the pin immediately. But now he's got this queen-bishop battery prepared on that h7 square. Now, black has a number of ways to defend this. First and foremost, he could still play this knight e4 idea, which is quite strong, because it's putting this knight on a good square. And, for example, since it's also discovered attack on this bishop here. So, for example, after bishop takes e7 and perhaps queen takes e7, black's got quite a nice hold on this position. Or, in fact, even g6, which just blocks off that diagonal completely, so the queen can't actually create anything useful with this battery. And the only problem with that is that it might create some dark square weaknesses and holes in the position. But luckily for my student, he played a very bad move. He played h6. He thought that it was stopping the queen coming here because it moved it away and attacking the bishop. But now white simply just removed the defender. And after bishop takes f6 back, queen to h7 was checkmate. And that's a fine use of the queen and bishop battery, and very, very common in most play. And it's a very simple way to attack the castled king. So it's a very useful thing to look at. How, in this example, I really, really like, it's taken from an actual game, and it's the batteries going on both sides, basically. Now, if it's white to play, white has a simple yet very effective checkmating motif here. It all comes down to the queen-bishop battery, but also the fact there's a powerful discovered attack here, a discovered check. Now, as I said, with discovered checks, it's quite easy to spot which piece you should be moving. So, for example, here's the line, and the bishop should be the piece that you're moving. The question is, where do you put the bishop to? Now, what you'd like to do is move the bishop out of the way, and once the king moves, you could play queen to h7 and deliver your checkmate to using the battery. However, should I move my bishop back to c2? Black does not have to play king g8 when he gets checkmated by queen h7, but instead has a defensive idea and can perhaps say block with the queen to h6, which would ruin all the fun. So you have to be quite selective of where you move this bishop to. So bishop to g6 is the key move here. Then after king g8, then queen h7 is indeed checkmate, and you can see the use of the queen and bishop working together on the same diagonal here to produce that same checkmating idea. Now if we go back to this position, the original position I've just shown you, and you let it be black's move. Now you can see black's already got his queen-bishop battery lined up, and he wants to aim down at h2. The problem is there are two things in black's way here. First of all, the knight on f4, which you need to produce a discovered attack with, and you'd think again you produce some sort of check, so maybe something like knight e2 might be able to do it, but unfortunately there's something else stopping here, and it's the fact that this queen is on h4, which is already defending h2. So in order to produce a good checkmate, you need to be able to kill two birds with one stone here. Now, it's quite a difficult tactic to see, but it is possible. And black has an absolutely beautiful move here. If it's black's move, he could actually play knight to h3 check. So he is delivering a check, which I said is most powerful, but also cutting off the defense of this queen to h2. So if you were to just take it, then not queen g3, queen to h2 comes in and checkmates. If they choose not to take the knight, then exactly the same thing, queen takes h2. So in fact, the only move that white has is to play queen takes h3, after which bishop takes h3 leaves black a queen for a piece up, but also still threatening his checkmate on h2. And those ideas come from the queen and bishop battery, and you can see how well they work on the same diagonals. So if you're looking for a way to attack the castled king, then you could do no harm by lining up your queen and your bishop on the same diagonal to go for a weak square next to the king.
Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe.